Difficulty, one of the hardest aspects of a game to tackle, mainly because determining what makes a game difficult is completely subjective from player to player. Basically, no matter what you do, there's no pleasing everyone and you will always have people that are gonna complain. But to lower the level of complaining, many games just say, you know what, let them choose their difficulty. And I don't like that. I am a perfect example of no matter what you do, someone will complain. Well, not actually complaining, it's more of a preference thing, but you know, whatever. I just feel like having the power of being able to decide how difficult my journey ahead is gonna be is an unnecessary decision that I don't feel like making, and it's one I'd rather just have made for me. And while I agree that choosing your own difficulty is a very safe way for games to cater to their players, I also think it's a very lazy method of handling difficulty. And what I mean by lazy is that most games opt in for the same boring gameplay adjustments depending on what difficulty you choose, like changing enemy health or damage output, adding more enemies, probably limiting player resources, you know, stuff like that. And yes, this technically does do its job and does make the game harder, but it makes the game harder in a bland and frustrating way rather than a challenging way. Also a fun way, don't forget that. And I think this is the biggest issue with the selectable difficulty approach. It suffers from a creativity standpoint on how to make a game more challenging in a good way. And before I continue, I just want it to be known that I'm not saying that games that have selectable difficulties are trash or anything. Tons of them are absolute bangers, and some of them actually utilize the different levels of difficulty pretty well, but a lot of them just don't. And in sole terms of a good challenge, selectable difficulties often have a hard time offering it. And there is a much better alternative to selectable difficulty that games use that I prefer. For me, I think the games that do it best are the ones that don't let you choose a set difficulty. Rather, they have dynamic difficulty systems that allow the player to approach presented challenges in a variety of ways with the set of tools they are given. Well, what do you mean by that, Jack? That was a lot of words right there. Great question. Let me explain. I got a few examples to explain this, and the example I'm gonna start with first is Elden Ring. And I know what you're thinking, oh god, another FromSoft fanboy. And yep, you'd be correct, you caught me there. Maybe not a complete fanboy, but these are games that I enjoy because they are my type of games. But regardless of whether you like FromSoft's games or not, no one can deny that Elden Ring was a massively successful game. And for a good reason. It reached an audience no one thought was possible because its surprising level of accessibility. FromSoft went above and beyond in making sure the game has enough tools at the player's disposal, which in theory would give them the best chances to overcome challenge. And the game does do that. If you're having a tough time with the boss, you can try the following: change your build, use AI summons, use real people summons, go farm some levels and come back stronger, go upgrade weapons, try using buffs. And those are just a few of the obvious options, or just get good. Nah, I'm joking. But this amount of freedom and choice given to the player mixed with the open world aspect of the game leads to an experience where the difficulty is largely self-determined. The game can be as challenging or as easy as you want it to be. If you want a near impossible game, don't level up your character and do a fist-only run. This would require god-tier levels of timing, patience, and skill that only few people on this planet have, making this a challenge that a casual player would never be able to do. But if you want the game to be substantially easier, go with an OP magic build, use summons, and keep your distance while you melt the bosses in a few seconds. But choosing either of these options, although very different in terms of difficulty and challenge, both lead to rewarding victories. Even though one comes with a "I'm a pussy" sticker, who cares, you still got to beat the boss. And you probably did it even faster than the no-life loser who takes pride in not using builds that make the game easier. Sorry, I had to find a way to shit on both sides there. But again, in the end, they accomplish the same thing, and that's ultimately what Elden Ring aims to do through its amazing game design. And that creative difficulty through good game design is the shit that I like. And considering it was done on a level to where the game attracted a ton of casual players is pretty impressive. But that's enough glazing Elden Ring, so let's move on. Another example, or genre so to speak, that I think nails handling difficulty and challenge are roguelikes. And yes, some of the best roguelikes out there let you choose difficulty, but it's a little more complicated than that. Because while whatever difficulty you choose is a base metric of what your experience is going to be like, the challenge in roguelikes lies in the mix of their core game mechanics, like only having one life, being procedurally generated, and having to actually learn from your mistakes to progress further into the game. And the roguelike I'm going to use as an example is Risk of Rain 2, because it's another game that can be very challenging or very easy depending on how the player utilizes the game's tools and mechanics. Also because it's probably my favorite roguelike of all time, so why not take the chance to talk about it. Risk of Rain 2 has a shit ton of ways for the player to overcome its challenge, and before I go over that, let's talk about the mechanics that contribute to that challenge. First, you have your time progression difficulty, which means the more time you spend in game, the harder it gets. This is so that as you level up, the enemies level up as well, so they stay relatively on par with your current power level. That is, unless you take too long, then you might get cooked. But they give you a little time meter, which is nice. There's obviously challenge from enemy variety. You got your small fish that can easily be clapped, but you also have enemies that can shit on you so fast that you wonder what even happened, so you gotta be careful. Then you have its hectic level of combat. This is a game where generally you have to stay on the move, otherwise you're gonna die. And the most obvious mechanic to point out, since it's a roguelike, is that you only have one life. There's also a few other forms of player-induced challenge that the game offers, which I'll touch on soon, but now I'm going to get into what the game offers to the player in order to kick some ass. The best thing being its character selection. Unlike most other roguelikes where you're stuck as one character, this game has a great selection of unlockable characters, all with very unique playstyles. Some characters are melee, some characters are ranged, and some are a mix of the two, so you definitely have some options to play around with. And the thing in this game that really enhances the different playstyles between characters are the items, which are character modifiers, so to speak. The items in this game can make your character into an absolute god. They give you a variety of special stat effects, which can be anything from gaining health from a kill to being able to have chain lightning attacks. And since these items stack, you can end up with a character that is pretty OP. And these are just two of the main mechanics that the player can utilize to shape the level of challenge in the game. You can also make it so you can choose items instead of them being random, which makes it better for getting items that are useful to the specific class you chose. You can add modifiers that drastically change aspects of the gameplay, and even collecting certain items that give your character an advantage, while at the same time giving you a disadvantage, and it's up to you to decide if that advantage is worth the cost of the downside. Overall, Risk of Rain 2, just like Elden Ring, does a great job of giving you a lot of options that fundamentally change the level of challenge. And like I said before, I think a lot of roguelikes handle difficulty and challenge well, considering that the core concept of these games is that you have to complete the game with one life. So I would imagine that handling and tweaking those systems properly is a tough thing to do. Or I'm guessing, I don't really know. But since I talked about the style of difficulty I prefer, and the two games that I think handled it great, let's talk about my less preferred option, selective difficulty. There's a lot of games that follow this same template as far as deciding how difficult to make their games, and they often use this default option of letting you choose. And the reason I'm not a huge fan of this is if I'm looking for a balanced challenge, I already lost. Let's look at Call of Duty World at War, for example. It's got 4 difficulties: Recruit, Regular, Hardened, and Veteran. For me, I automatically wipe the first 2 off the table and usually go Hardened. I beat the game a few times on Hardened over the years, so I went back and decided that I was ready for Veteran. And I guess I just wasn't. And let me just say quickly, Call of Duty World at War is my favorite one of all time. I fucking love this game. But if you choose to go veteran difficulty in the campaign, you better get your fucking umbrellas out, because the forecast calls for grenades. Grenades are the main thing they seem to add to make the game more difficult. On veteran, standing in a spot for more than a blink of an eye will get you bukkakied by explosives. It's almost as if instead of bullets, the enemies only shoot grenades. And because of that, you have 2 options. Try and run away, which will almost always result in you getting gunned down if you're in a bad spot, or you can accept your fate from the grenade gods, let them take your life, and just hope and pray that next time, where you're standing, there won't be as many grenades. I think that is garbage difficulty. It's funny how ridiculous it is at first, but it gets fucking annoying pretty quick. Those grenades don't pose a challenge that you can simply just find a way around, because it's random, and their sole purpose is to be a constant annoyance just because you chose veteran. And this is just my experience with World at War. This may differ from player to player, but by the end of the playthrough, my character is probably looking like this guy. But anyways, the game doing this whole fucking grenade parade is completely fine with me, because this is the hardest case scenario I'm talking about here. So if I'm getting frustrated or not having fun with the challenge that's being presented in veteran, I can always go back to hardened. I already know that a good amount of these types of games don't have the type of good challenge that I'm looking for. Some people may love getting grenades fucking shoved in their face every 2 seconds, but I'm not one of them. And I've accepted that this is just a common thing among games that offer the choice of what difficulty you play on. As I said before, it's still the safest way to ensure that any player can get through the game, while also providing those who are looking for more of a quote-unquote challenge the option to do so. And as much as I love games not having the choice of difficulty modes, I can't deny it's a more exclusive method rather than an inclusive one, and that's just a fact, bro. But since I would consider myself at least a competent gamer, here's my stance on difficulty without considering any other factors other than my own opinions. I do prefer games that have one set difficulty, because these are often the ones I find pretty balanced in my experience, And if they're somehow not balanced, fuck it, that's the way the game was meant to be played, and I respect it. Plus, if it's a good game anyways, I'll play it no matter what, and them perfectly balancing that level of challenge would just be a cherry on top. That way I don't go fucking brain dead mode while playing, so I can stay engaged and enjoy the game. Remember that? Enjoying games? Yeah, me too. But that's it for me. Let me know your guys' take on this whole topic in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.